live. Happy Wednesday from Texworld, New York City trade show, where we are all here at the beautiful Starlight Lehigh building in Chelsea. And thank you if you're joining us live, because this is a hybrid event, or if you're joining us on Zoom today. Thank you so much, and welcome to Texworld and Ask the Experts, where you will get to ask questions to all the experts in sourcing, sustainability, circular materials, local domestic production, fabrics, product development, or anything you are wondering if you're trying to shift to deepen your sustainable practices in fashion. I'm so excited, thrilled, and really delighted to welcome our panelists today. Our first one is Peter Shaer, owner of Zen Textiles, or Zentex, and he has so many sustainable fabrics that he's going to share with you, and any questions you have in terms of textile sourcing. Anna Livermore, founder and CEO of V.Mora, amazing resource for design, product development, production. You need it, she's got it. Lanette, Freitag, president of FeltLOOM. Really, truly, if you think about the circular economy in the future, it is here today. And you can ask Lanette about that. And Chung, who is joining us remotely, president of MCM Enterprise, great factory group here in New York. Moderator today is Anupama, Pasricha, the executive director of the Educators for Socially Responsible Apparel Practices, and also a professor of fashion and chair of that department of fashion design at St. Catherine University, joining us remotely. Hello, Anu. And everyone, I'm Andrea Kennedy, sustainability lead at Fashiondex, and I also teach sustainability and fashion merchandising classes at LIM College here in New York. So with that, thank you for joining us at Ask the Experts. We want you to ask questions. So if you're here joining us in person, just raise your hand. But if you're on Zoom watching, please put your question in the Q&A box. And it's easier to do that than in the chat box. And we will read your questions aloud and have our panelists answer them throughout. So with that, thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it to you, Anu.
Hi, thank you, Andrea. I also want to read a comment before I start, that there's comment in chat is the ton of background noise. Can the background be silenced? So hopefully, so anyone, when we are talking, maybe we can silence the background there. So if that would be helpful.
That is good to know. Thank you. We are on the floor of a trade show, so we can do the best we can.
Perfect. So anyway, so Anna, Chung, Lanette, and Peter, thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself and your company and tell us about your sustainability and social responsibility approach. So anyone can go first. I don't want to call out names. Whoever is more excited to talk about it, go for it.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. Hi, Peter Shaer, as I was introduced. We're a textile company, been in business for about 30 years and pretty much seen it all. We have an in-stock collection of fabrics. We're pretty much a supermarket, so we have a little bit of everything. And one of the main collections that we have is an organic, sustainable collection of fabrics that's actually been increasing in demand over the past few years. A lot of people, that's what they're looking for. Recycled polyesters, organic cotton, tencel, cell, modal, things of that nature. And that's becoming more and more popular every day. We've seen a lot of requests for recycled polyester, and it looks to us like the future will be that almost all polyester produced will be recycled polyester, not even regular. So that's the trend that we're headed for. More and more people looking for that. So we try to develop more items every season with sustainable items. Also organic cotton, that's also very big, especially when it comes to children's wear or people that want, just basic sportswear items. So that's also become very big for us, but we're definitely trying more and more every day to keep the world a better, cleaner place. And part of our growing line is sustainable fabrics.
Hi, I'm Anna Livermore, and I own V.Mora. And at V.Mora, we help launch fashion designers. So we do patterns and samples, manufacturings, and help source goods. So we work with our clients to do things as sustainable as they're looking to do. Whether you want us to connect you with people like Peter or MCN Manufacturing for sustainable resources, and even packaging or your fulfillment, or anything that is important to you to make your brand as sustainable as possible. My company is female-owned, obviously, and we have female teams. So as far as like ethical practices, things like that. And yeah, that's basically it. So we help with everything start to finish, whether you're looking for patterns, brand strategy, budgeting, manufacturing, and we're located in New York City here on 30th and Broadway.
Thank you, Anna and Peter. So Lanette, do you want to go next?
Yes, I'm Lanette Freitag, and I am the founder and president of FeltLOOM Incorporated. And we developed a machine that helps very much in the sustainable world, because I know that only 1% of the clothing today is now repurposed somehow. And we have the ability to take existing clothing or else excess production scraps to be able to be repurposed into a new fabric that will eliminate them being just discarded and things. So and it's an easy process, and it can be used by people without great skill set, and it's something that tweaks people's creativity to create great one-of-a-kind products.
Wonderful. Thank you. Chung, you want to go next? Did I say your name correctly?
Absolutely. I am Chung. I am the manager of MCM Enterprise, a family-owned domestic manufacturer located in Brooklyn, New York. We work with all kinds of designer, from small to large. We are full-service manufacturing. We could help anybody with design, development, production, logistics, consulting, anything that have to do with fashion industry. We try to work with all designers that want to be sustainable, and also others, we educate them and guide them through the process to try to save money, save time, and save resources in the long run.
Thank you. And I think before I go on to my next question, I thought there was a question which perhaps Peter can answer faster than I can, So I'll just read it. Is that okay, Andrea, or do you want to read the questions?
Sure, let's alternate. And then if anyone also has a question here for any of the panelists, just raise your hand. But kick it off.
Yeah, so the question, what I saw in the chat is that, is there any such thing as sustainable stretch fabric?
It's something that it's a little bit of an oxymoron, because the stretch part of it isn't really organic. We're not really yet. So if you want stretch, it has to be a polyurethane or spandex, and that's not something that's really organic. But you can make an organic cotton with polyurethane, so it could be mostly organic. You could use polyester yarns. Sometimes you could use a polyester yarn that gives it a mechanical stretch. So you could use a recycled polyester yarn to give it the stretch. It's going to be mechanical, but not really something with spandex or polyurethane. But I'm sure in the near future, like I said before, most things are leaning towards that. So I'm sure if they haven't made it yet, they're working on it.
Great.
Okay.
I'll ask one other question, if it's okay with you, Anu. Brasha is asking, Anna and all the panelists, I can even jump in on that one too. Does your company help with any carbon accounting?
We have not, but I know that there's, Fashiondex does. So we can connect you with a company like Fashiondex that can help. So.
Right, at Fashiondex, we can carbon footprint and virtual water footprint your products. So from farm straight through to your stores or your warehouse.
And I think some attendees are having difficulty viewing the panelists. So I think I'm just going to say it loud that try your gallery view because I'm able to see everyone. So just try that on the right side of the screen. You have a view button on the top right. You should set it to gallery view and you'll be able to see it, hopefully. Yeah. And then also we got a comment that there's a recycled spandex available now as well. So that's a good news, you know, kind of that's coming.
Thank you for sharing. That's great news.
Yeah. So Andrea, can I move on to my next question? All right. So since we are here at the sourcing show, so I think question about sourcing, decisions about sourcing becomes really important. So with the sustainability as one of the important goals, how should designers, merchandisers, and companies should think about sourcing? Should they be asking different questions, approaching sourcing in a different way, how they, you know, as compared to the past? So if anybody can chime in on from our, you know, panelists here.
I would say that when thinking about sustainable fabrics, not only is it the composition, but it's also the dyeing process. There's so many things that go into the fabrics. You can have an organic fabric that then isn't sustainably dyed and it changes. So knowing what you're looking for specifically, using organic dyes limits you in the color. So if you're going to come to Peter and say, I want a hot pink organic dyed fabric, he's going to tell you, what do we dye that with, right?
Right, pretty much, yes. It's hard to keep everything very natural. So the fabric itself could be organic. The fibers can be organic, but when it comes to dyeing, it's going to be very difficult to keep the dye as an organic dye. So that's something that's, you know, I'm sure also being worked on, but not as many colors are available in organic, 100% organic.
Right, because they're using things like beets and organic
Vegetable dyes,
yeah,
vegetable dyes and things like that, but it's difficult to make mass production of fabrics like that. Also, it's going to be hard to keep the color in.
right.
You have to, you know, everything is it's a chemistry, and you have to make it in a way where it sustains the color, and the color doesn't run later. So that takes some chemicals and different ways of making it. Dyes really can't be 100% organic the way we would like it to be. If I could just add something to that, I know everybody's looking to make more organic fabrics, but there's so much fabric out there that's sitting in warehouses and people's storage. People who have extra fabric, whether you're a fabric company or you're a dress company or a tile manufacturer, I think it would really be much better to use fabrics that are sitting around than to make new fabrics. So it's not great, but there's so much really available all over the world. So if we can repurpose that fabric instead of it going to wasteland and places where, you know, ultimately just, you know, containers and containers of fabric thrown out all the time. If we could somehow repurpose that, it would really help, you know, everybody all around. As much as like we would love to sell more fabrics and make fabrics, but I think it'd be great for the environment if we can use what's already there. So instead of just sourcing something that's organic, you could always ask fabric companies if you have anything left over, something that they're not using. You could ask, you know, anyone you come across. People are sitting with tons of fabric in their inventory, and it's you could probably get a better price, and it's much more better for the environment to use that than to go buy new fabric.
I feel like too that was one of the silver linings of COVID because production stopped. And if you wanted fabric, you had to go to what you had left over from seasons before, or talk to other people, see what they had readily available without producing more because we weren't able to. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Chung or Lanette, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think that today we are working to develop the new techniques to be able to repurpose that fabric into a different look from the past, and that the materials that are available can be changed. They don't have to look exactly like they did before. And we need to look at that as a productive way to stay sustainable. And FeltLOOM certainly helps that. useful. And, it's what the felt would be if you're a large company, you use it as a R&D machine to be able to say, hey, yeah, this is what if I change it and this fabric that we have a ton of, how do we repurpose it and do the little trials before it went to big industry to be purposed. Or you could do people could do that on how to do this on a smaller scale and for very specific design pieces that the world really wants. We want to buy a million of everything made. So we offer that ability with our machines.
Wonderful. Chung, do you have anything to add?
Well, when it comes to sustainability, it always comes down to we actually use less than what the earth produces, right? So, but that's counterintuitive when I say that, because we just produce more than what we need right now. But when it comes to manufacturing, for us, it's all about efficiency and how much you could save on the process. So the less you waste, the better it is. That's just a processing thing. Second thing, if you are sourcing for material, I believe there's a lot of option out there. You just have to do your research. Technology is improving right now. They have stuff with mushrooms and stuff like that. That's totally 100% organic. But you just have to, research and ask the right people where to find those items. So if you don't know where to find it, the best thing is, look for a consultant that can help you with that. A lot of time you can find people like, Annette and all these people, and they have information which is free.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Excellent. We have so many questions in the chat box and the Q&A. Do we have any questions here? Yes, let's take a live question and then we'll go back to the Q&A. Shout it out, sir.
You mentioned that you have organic fabrics, and the dyes aren't always organic. Do you find customers are okay with 50% organic, and that people are comfortable with?
Let's repeat that question so the people online can hear it too.
What, do you want me to repeat?
Yeah, sure.
What he was asking was, with the fabrics being organic, but the dyeing process not, are people okay with 50% being organic? And I'm assuming you mean the consumer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is in your brand story that you build. It's really difficult, unfortunately, to be organic, sustainable every single step of the way. If you have a button and it's plastic. So choosing your story and really shouting that of like, I use organic fabric or organic materials, the fabrics, or whether that's going to be, I'm not using any plastics at all. That would mean you're limited in your fabrics, or you're doing an organic dyeing process, but really picking what is important to you and your brand and putting that into your marketing story. The word organic is thrown around so loosely. You want to explain to your consumer what you mean by sustainable, what you mean by organic, because it can mean so many different things.
Yeah, if I could just add to that. So basically, like she was saying, the whole process can't be 100% organic. There's nobody picking cotton by hand. It's machinery that's going out there still picking the cotton. It's they make sure the cotton itself is organic, but by the time you go through the process, you pick the cotton, you comb it, you card it, you have to truck it, you have to machine it. So organic is a very sexy term, but at the same time very vague, because there's so many other processes that have to go through, whether it's apparel or even food or whatever it is. You throw that term around all the time, but you have to look at the big picture. So like Anna was saying, if you're putting a zipper in there, if you're putting a button in there, I don't know if everything can really be truly 100% organic unless you do the whole process by hand. And with the dye stuff, it's really impossible to do a lot of fabric in volume in small batches. The color won't come out straight, you're gonna have a lot of variants and things like that. So at one point that has to be good. Is it better than nothing being organic? Of course, 50% is better than zero. So for now, I think it's acceptable. And hopefully in the future we can make it better.
Yeah, I think those are some of the great points both of you said. And something about even, looking at certifications like GOT certified, that looks into all the steps of production, right, including dyes or whatever. And as Anna, you mentioned about the brand story, I think that's also about transparency and thinking about like, what do you want to tell your customer and what is important to them, right? So it's really important to see that where you want to go with that, and as and see if that certification is worth the cost, because it's going to cost money, right? So if you have those certifications, which will ensure that every stage has been looked at. So if that is important to you as a brand, then definitely that's something to think about. And kind of, Andrea, I'll let you get back to the questions from our attendees here, because there's a lot of good comments and questions, but I just wanted to throw in that because I thought that was so relevant.
Okay, so I'm so sorry, everyone. There are so many wonderful questions here. If you are looking for a specific, we have questions looking, for instance, for fur with a low MLQ. If you are new to the industry, MLQ is minimum order quantity. We have a couple questions on specific fabric for specific items. We'll save those till kind of later and get to these kind of more exact questions, but you can always call Fashiondex and we can just say a list over the phone to you, but we will try and get to those. So we're hearing that, all right, well, just one more question about organic is the question is that so many companies are claiming to be organic, but they're not. So Fashiondex is right now working with someone who does buy their fabric on Etsy. They buy 50 yards this day, 100 yards this day, because they're low, and they've been saying they're organic. And I've said, what is the organic certification? And the supplier has never responded on that question. So what do you all say about that when you feel like there's no transparency? Can we call it organic if it's not certified? Which I think is what you're asking here, Elena. Thanks for the question.
Well, there are certifications you can look for, like Anu was saying, the GOT certification that's these terms and make sure that they're following the process. But is there really something stopping from brands like that to say this is an organic product? No, there's no repercussions for that, or ways if she's not saying that she's got this certain certification. Obviously, if she's saying she has a certain certification and she doesn't, that's a problem. But I think the word organic and sustainable has gotten really watered down. And so as a consumer, they need to be more educated around, to ask, but the general consumer might not.
And back to Anu's question of how can we source differently than we've sourced in the past, one of those is asking whatever the claims they say are on the header, if it says that it's organic, well, is it GOTS, is it organic certified, et cetera, asking those questions. So definitely, if there are no answers, I would be skeptical.
Yeah.
You may want to ask for the certificate before you make the purchase or before you actually go through. If you're buying retail, if you're buying from Etsy, you definitely want to maybe ask them to show it to you before they ship it to you. So that would be important. I think when you're working with bigger wholesale companies, the more reputable they've been around, when we do sell in bulk, we do provide hang tags or labels for bulk orders that the customers could put on their garments to show that it is sustainable. It's going to be hard when it's retail and they get their fabrics from all over the place. But I think with bigger wholesale companies, it's more of a reputable source, and they definitely provide these certifications.
And similarly, there was another question, obviously I can't go back to see who it was, but mentioned about like, how do you know that even if it's a dead stock fabric, then how do you know it is actually dead stock fabric, or, somebody's trying to. So I think that comes back to the ethics of doing business. And, if you're saying something, claiming something, then assuming that it is done ethically. So ethics is very important. And I've also seen some evidence of like technology that's using for tracing the entire, right from crop to the product. So it looks like in future, I don't know, what do you think, all four of you experts here from the industry, that would that be mainstream, then, be able to trace your entire right from the fiber, would you be able to do that? Then even because
Some things you can, but there's a big process, and sometimes the yarn, the fibers are made in one country, shipped to another country to be made into yarn, then they're woven in another country into fabric, and finally shipped somewhere else to be made into apparel. So sometimes it's going to be difficult to trace everything completely. Is it possible? It's possible, but not always.
Well, I think what you're saying is like they're creating like a DNA footprint of fabric. And
Yep.
scientists do that.
I think Textile Genesis is a company, I think, that is doing that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your dead stock question. Dead stock should generally be a lot less expensive than the regular line. So that's something, if it's dead stock, they want to give it away. If the fabric is $10 a yard, that shouldn't be $10 a yard, the dead stock. So it should be less. You may want to do your research with the company first, ask questions. Then you ask if they have any dead stock and how much they have of it. That's another thing, usually they don't have 10,000 yards of dead stock, it's a few hundred yards of this or that. So definitely do your research, ask questions, and it should be a lot lower than the regularly priced items.
Amazing. So there's a question here about production in terms of pricing. Is local production more expensive? Isn't local production more expensive? Chung, let's hear your thoughts on that, a local producer.
Well, it depends who you work with and how knowledgeable they are in the process. When it comes down to production, it always comes down to three things, okay? Basically, it's the detail of the product, which determine the time and the labor costs. Second thing that determine cost is the total quantity produced. That will determine the average setup cost per garment. And the last thing is delivery. You could actually accomplish to any price you want if you're willing to compromise. You just have to work with the manufacturer to get to the price target that you need. So it's always good. When I talk to my customer, there's nothing to hide. Basically, a lot of people think we are car salesmen, but we are not. If you have a price target, we could do it. We'll tell you how to get there. If there's a price that we could not make, we just say, sorry, we couldn't do it. But usually domestically, price is much higher than imports. But like I said, once again, it really depends on how you're willing to compromise. If you want to compromise or sacrifice detail and workmanship, yeah, you could save some money on certain part of it. Whereas if you take a longer delivery, if a manufacturer have extra time that's open, they may charge you with a very low rate on labor because those empty slot anyway. Stuff like that. You produce more and your average cost is much cheaper instead of like make to order one piece, then you actually have to pay for sample price. Stuff like that.
I always say too, when you think about pricing, if you think about it in an ethical way, someone is making this garment with their hands. This takes time. If you have a garment that takes an hour and you want it for $3, and no one can do that here because our minimum wage is set, but you're doing it offshore, someone is still doing that product for $3 in an hour. So you want to think about your pricing ethically too, because when I turn it around, when someone comes to me and says, I want a pattern done for $20, and I say, well, a pattern takes 8 hours. So at 8 hours, $20 an hour, and you break it down hourly, like, are you really comfortable paying someone for their time at that? And most of the time, gratefully, it's no. But I think if you start thinking about the price points being related to an hourly and what you're comfortable with, it changes things. Because everyone wants things cheaper, but doesn't really think about what that means.
It is such a good point because we're so trained. We're taught in fashion school how to negotiate, right? But when you negotiate, often we're negotiating labor when we're negotiating cost of goods, because they're not going to make that fabric any cheaper. So you're negotiating people's living, like we have to really rethink negotiation.
Other things you may want to keep in mind is that there's a lot of unknown when you're importing. If you're a small to mid-sized manufacturer, You kind of know the price when you're making things domestically, but when you're importing and it's very few pieces and it's not a container load and it's not coming by, by boat, you're going to get a lot of surprise charges. Shipping is very expensive, things that are unknown. You want to do your homework and make sure you have all the pricing. Generally, it doesn't cost a lot less to import. It actually makes more sense to do it here domestically. You know all the charges, and you won't have any surprises down the line.
Andrea, do you want to look at another question from the?
Sure, I'm going to see, I see there's a question here from Connie. Would you suggest shelving, I guess, your ethical practices and your sustainable practices or fair trade or organic or recycled, whatever it is, on your label, on your garments, or on your websites, or both? So more of a marketing question. Anyone?
I would say,
Or made in New York?
yeah. For as far as like your care label, you want to keep that to an industry standard. What has to be on a care label, and your brand label, I wouldn't personally put a lot of things on the actual label in the garment, but there's a hang tag for the purpose of you telling your brand story. So that's where I would include that information about fair trade or organic, things like that. Maybe adding one word with your tagline onto the brand logo that's sewn in. But I think most of that information is told through your packaging, through your hang tag, and on your website.
Great.
And I can add to that, like, again, as Anna mentioned, that make sure that the care label is following FTC regulations, right? That's really important. And so is with the claims that you're putting, make sure that you have evidence for those claims, some paperwork behind whatever you're putting in your tagline. And one tiny suggestion here would be from when you use the hang tags, again, look into the recycled paper or whatever materials that are sustainable, even when you're thinking about packaging as well as your tags, whatever you use. So I think those things we forget sometimes, but then those are also part of thinking, holistically thinking sustainable, if that's what you want to do.
And then also the plastic Swift tag to attach that hang tag. We have a brand that we work with now that are using salvages so that they're working towards solving material waste. So there are other ways to do that. Companies sometimes use hemp or little, tying it off with string, all better than plastics. I have a question for Lanette in terms of, since we're talking about material waste, because there's a lot of leftovers sometimes when you're making those samples. And you're making, so what do you think about that, like material waste?
Well, I think that the material waste can have another purpose. It doesn't have to be wasted. I think you have to look at it and think about new possibilities of use and different fabrics and act different on the repurpose cycle, like spandex. It's harder to purpose, say, in natural fibers. But you don't have to just say, well, it's waste and throw it away, because there is new life things. You can take small pieces and make like a collage cloth or something that put a new book to bags and use clothes for, do accessories, and do wear art or different things that would definitely take the waste and give it a new personality.
I have a question for you. Then do you collect this extra fabric from factories, or if a designer has some items that didn't sell that they're ready to get rid of, or how does that work?
Well, currently the way we are working is FeltLOOM. We manufacture the machine that does the processing, the reconnecting the waste. So we are a small company that is just growing, and we are trying to get it positioned so that we have machines to be able to use the waste by the factories actually in-house, so they don't have to send them off and have people
wow.
have jobs.
Yeah.
We had worked with the addiction recovery centers to try to see if we could position the machines there.
Oh,
And then
wow.
we could take the factory waste and they could do the run. But we're all on the beginning stages and it takes funding and we were all ready to go. COVID hit and slowed us down, so we have to work again. When you have people that are taking things that are wasteful in the world and they are laying them out in new beautiful designs and see this result, they're taking things that have no purpose, giving them a purpose, and the creativity just grows.
Yeah.
And it's a comfort level of sort of joy that comes about for somebody to find. It's a win-win situation.
That's great.
Do you have a question?
I do kind of related to what you were speaking
A
about.
little bit louder.
I do have a question related to kind of what we're talking about here with the scraps. What would you recommend, or what are some best practices with dunnage and scraps? Obviously, we're using them and repurposing them, but is there a better standard that we should be looking to adhere to with our dunnage, with our scraps for production and sampling?
Yeah, I think it's all in development of people accepting the scraps and making something else out of it, or old garments, or dead stock. There's a few companies out there trying to put something together. But I don't know of any right now that's taking scraps. Just, do you?
Well, Fab Scrap, for instance, will take your scraps
Okay.
and they turn it into shoddy. And I know people that have been buying that shoddy and using it inside pillows and mixing it with fiber fill so that it's 50% recycled inside their carpets and whatnot. So there are some solutions. You can use your cutting room scraps and create new fabric, you know, with machines like FeltLOOM. I mean, the most important thing is we realize is we rethink waste because waste has value. We've spent money on it and this can create materials that you don't have to buy again. So, I mean, there are some reverse logistic impacts and whatnot on there, but that's the most important.
I'm fascinated by your machine. I am Anupama. I'm a financial designer,
Nice and loud, please.
but I'm working on a 501c project, and I saw your machine. Have you ever thought of utilizing it to put things that jog memory, like doilies or hand crochet items? Machine where you can hold the memory of an ancestor in the garment that you wear.
Yes, we have talked at length about making of things that are from your past that you would cherish and have forever. But people have a lot of excess things in their closet, and it's hard sometimes to but if you could take part of it and put it into the next step, then we have something that we cherish as a actually, it's not really love, so and so you can take living on you can take some of the old vintage things and just make fabrics and feels change that even the way the fabric itself, so it almost feels like it has always the right place.
So let's move Anu to a question. I'm so sorry, just because there's so many questions here. You want to read one back again from the Q&A box? There have been a few questions on where to get dead stock. And just if you're not seeing these questions, and of course it's recommended by John, but I would have put it in there had I seen that question. Stephanie from Queen of Brawl is a great spot for dead stock. Anu, do you want to go with the next question? There's so many here.
Oh, geez.
You are muted.
You did.
So Andrea, do you want to go with the costing question, the cost price question? Or?
I mean, yes, Chung spoke briefly to it, but let's hear Chung and everybody thinking about it again, because at Fashiondex, we do sustainability consulting and product footprint and whatnot. We do often get said, spoken to by people when we identify the hot spots, the biggest environmental impacts and whatnot, and suggest things for change. Sometimes those do cost more. So what are the 4 of your thoughts on ways to offset that? So maybe they want to cut down their transportation impacts and produce locally. Maybe they want to, buy machines such as yours. Maybe they want to use the ethical factories that you're talking about and your sustainable fabrics that are recycled and whatnot. And now their line items on their cost sheets are increasing a little. How can they offset so they can they sell at the same price? If so, how? So who wants to kick us off on that? Chung, how about you?
Sorry, I missed a lot of those questions, a lot of background noises. But when it comes to costing, it all really comes down to planning. A lot of people, I work with a lot of designers. Very often they have an idea in mind, what they want to produce from the very start, and they go source the material. Then they ask quote from manufacturer, and they add up the price and they mark it up. I found that very unproductive. The best way for a designer, if they have a number in mind, they should reverse engineer the process, start with the number, then source it backward. Okay. And if a manufacturer, they come to me and ask for $2 a garment, I can't do it. I offer $4, then I'm not the right fit for them. Okay. Whereas if they buy material for $100 a yard and the garment take 1 yard and trying to sell it $125, it won't be affordable for them to produce it. So sometimes you have to ask the right question to get to the right answer. Not usually from the concept stage where you determine what you want to use, what your target is, who's your target customer, and you reverse engineer the process and get to the number that you need to. Okay, that's usually the easiest way to do it. Meanwhile, if you're talking about manufacturing once again is pretty simple. It's labor and time. You cut down labor, you cut down time. You either cut down your detail, which is the labor cost, and your price will reduce. Or when it comes to labor costs, the time you cannot change the detail. You want to sacrifice detail. Maybe you need to source it from a different state, like New York. My minimum is 15 hours, whereas you go to a different state is half the price. Okay, those are the things that you could do, but you have to work at that. So when you have those questions, the best thing to do is ask the manufacturer, how can you do this? Can it be accomplished? And usually manufacturer will walk you through the process, and they'll tell you, yes, I could do it. No, we couldn't do it, And how you could do it, you just ask. If you ask, I'll tell you.
Thank you, Chung. And I have a question for Lanette, actually, if we have a minute. So Lanette, what all fibers you're able to, that the felt you create, what can it be any fiber or?
It works with a great deal of fibers and fabrics. It definitely started with wools and all the animal fibers, and it works extremely well with those. It also has worked with silks and cottons, and then we've used rayons for different techniques. It works with polyester, acrylics. It's just pretty more what it doesn't work with than it does with, it's things like that. But sometimes fabrics made with a bonding agent or something that cause problems. So, it's not always 100% that it will work. So we have to run little trials to see, how it reacts with the machine.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. And if that's okay, I think maybe we can give each speaker, our panelists, to answer the last question about the, or do you want to ask a question before that?
If everybody's willing, let's go 5 more minutes before we hit the final question. Here's something about extended producer responsibility, that brands should be responsible for what they manufacture and take it back. Do any of you know any great initiatives like this that you can kind of inspire the people that are wondering, how would I even do that?
I don't understand the question.
What's the question?
Extended producer responsibility. Whatever you produce, you're responsible for it and you bring it and you take it back. Kind of like what Eileen Fisher does with Renew and Madewell does with their jeans.
Yeah.
Do you know any recommendations if someone's trying to think of that strategy for their company?
The name is escaping me, but I know that there's a woman in Brooklyn that's specifically looking just to do that. So I think that there's a lot going on with taking goods that are ready to be recycled or are done being used, but then also thinking about it from start to finish to create a whole loop. There's so many people that are going to be involved: fabric, manufacturers, selling, consumers, and then starting the process over without starting the process again. That it's going to take a lot of people, but there's definitely people that are working on it, like you and everyone, with the fabrics, the manufacturing. But yeah, it'd be great if there was someone that was full circling everything. It's just there's a lot of different components in making something completely sustainable and eliminating waste.
Yes, all true. Speaking of name escaping me, the one I always recommend in North Carolina, this textile recycling giant facility that a lot of big brands use. If whoever is asking that question needs a facility to do that, after this panel, email me at akennedy@fashiondex.com and I'll share that company. Just can't remember it right now. Okay.
Rachel Kibbe was her name.
Okay.
Rachel Kibbe.
Oh, Rachel Kibbe is out of Brooklyn.
Yes,
Is working
that's what
on
I was,
this.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
All right. And then we have a panelist saying contact John Dickinson if you want more information. He's an expert on EPR. Okay, there's no laws on clothing. So this is great. Thank you for sharing that information. Okay, so let's take one last question. The biggest carbon impact on the supply chain happens at tier 3 and 4. So, if you're not aware of that, tier 4 would be the cultivation or the extraction of the materials to make those trims and materials. And tier 3 is processing that into something that then the supplier can, like, into yarn or whatnot. So how can we get that more sustainable? If those are the biggest impacts. Chung, Lanette, Anna, or Peter?
Oh, can you repeat that question? What do you need to?
If the biggest impacts are at your materials and tier 3 and 4, how can you help that become less sustainable? I mean, more sustainable.
Well, like I said, it usually starts with the process and choosing what you want to use. Then it's the process itself. The second thing, the last thing, of course, is the end user. Not to waste a lot of goods, but there's a lot of company out there with new technology right now that actually recycle a lot of scrap. They make it out of, there's like Taiwan company, the only one in the world that take fabric scrap and make it into building material. Okay, and there's a lot more companies coming up because sustainability is so important right now that there's a lot of companies that created that actually aim to be more sustainable and help the earth to be everybody to be sustainable. But for manufacturing purposes, we are all about understanding what our customer want and how to achieve the process. So if you want to be sustainable and not waste a lot of goods, first you start with the material, of course, source the right material, use the right material. Then when you produce it, learn how not to waste any goods, any scrap. You could donate it to other company. We do a lot of small scrap. We'll donate it to the people who fix cars, and they'll use that for their shop. Whereas the big remnants, rolls, we'll donate to art schools, fabric scrap, and all these people so they can reuse it. A lot of time, we have people that come to our place that actually, very talented designer. They take scrap and make garment out of it. They cut a lot of pieces and sew them together and make a fabric, and they cut the fabric and make a garment, stuff like that.
Thank you. Peter?
It's really it's a demand and supply. So the more demand there is for it, the more you ask for it, the more people are looking for it, the more the fiber companies and fabric companies and factories will start looking for that. So it's definitely an uptake. Everyone's asking for it, so you can be sure that that's what the demand is. That's what they're looking to be making in the future. And like I said earlier, recycled polyester will be the way of the future because that's what people want to use. So all polyester will one day be recycled. I think the same as other fibers. As there's more demand for it in the industry, the more people will be making that for from the beginning, from the fiber stage and the raw materials.
I think too, what everyone can do that's concerned about sustainability and looking for these solutions is walk the walk, buy your products that are sustainable, stop buying fast fashion, figure out ways to recycle your own clothes, because it starts really with the consumer and where they're spending their money. Because this whole process is deterring on that. If no one's going to pay the extra money to have these sustainable items, then the designers are going to be stuck not being able to produce sustainably. So don't just talk about how you want your product to be sustainable, but show where you're spending your money. And that will affect things in turn. And it's shifting for sure. But you can't, wear fast fashion and then demand a sustainable fabric because you're contradicting yourself.
Well, I also think that education is very, very key because I don't think anybody ever talks about the ingredients in a fabric. And the world doesn't speak in textiles in that terms. And so, your hands aren't trained to feel the fibers that are in it and to know, hey, this is different. This makes me feel good, or this doesn't. And to get that education as true as what fibers act like, what's involved in them, and how they're going to react in the whole life cycle of the fabric.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you all about that. And kind of going back to, there was a comment from the audience, like our attendees, that about the recycled polyester tends to lose its quality. And that would mean that if you're using that, then you are perhaps making a garment that's not as durable or would still shed fibers in washing. But I believe that there are technologies now that they are able to produce recycled in the same quality level. So that's works in progress. And it goes back to that consumer demand also. So I think if your consumer wants it and wants that transparency, wants to know your story, that's where you'll be able to sell. So I think it's kind of like everybody's is a stakeholder, and Lanette, as you said, education is key there. So I think I agree with all of your, what you said. So kind of, I'm going to go ahead and ask the big last question that can take all whoever is attending with something to think about. What each one of you would advise as the first step or the most impactful area for sustainability that a designer, merchandiser, or companies should take to become more sustainable and responsible at their level?
It's a really broad question. I think education is great, educating yourself around what is going to be most important to you. And is it going to be people and the people that work on your brand? Is it going to be materials? Is it going to be packaging? Just education around what you feel is in your heart, what you want to make an impact. Because it can be, there's a million ways that just anything small can make a difference. And having the idea that you're going to do everything from start to finish is hard, if not impossible. So just figuring out what your message is and where you want it to go, and building that into your brand, and then educating your consumer around what that is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Definitely, I think flexibility is very key for all designers. If that's what they want to do, and doing your research. And again, if you're flexible and you can use leftover fabrics, or if you can become creative, there's also not only fabrics, there's buttons, there's zippers, there's all kinds of things. If you can kind of tweak yourself a little bit, and expand your horizons and use things that are, you know, more readily available, could be even less expensive than what you would imagine. So I think you have to be very creative, and if you do that, it will definitely help you going forward and grow.
And I think that, you know, if we always thought, well, you don't waste food, well, why not think we don't waste textiles? And so start putting that thought out there in the world that textiles can be material that is not wasted, and start put that thought in the consumers and the designers' minds and use it responsibly.
No, I just want to add one more thing. You can also mix things. Not everything, you know, if you can take partly organic or partly, you know, leftover fabrics and mix it with something else, that's also very good. If you can just, you know, be creative and imaginative, it doesn't have to be 100%. You could say this is partly organic, this is some remnant fabrics used with some new fabrics, this is some, you know, old buttons with new buttons or whatever it is that you're doing. If you get very creative, I think you'll do well at this.
I agree with 100% with everybody. The only thing I add is, if you're a designer that really want to go this route, just practice what you preach, because when you're real and you're honest, and and people will start to listen to your story, and you can influence them, and they will also follow you. Okay, sustainability is a group effort, so you need to, you know, get your story out, tell them why you're doing it and how you're doing it, and people will listen, and they start to, you know, follow you, and they will do the same thing, and more people will do it, and eventually, you know, we will be able to, you know, get to where we need to be. The problem is a lot of people just use it as a marketing tool that I found, you know, because I work with a lot of them. They just use one to put the tag on, and when they actually produce it, they're not sustainable at all. You know, as a, you know, manufacturer, I can't tell them, you know, you're not sustainable. But very often they like to use it as a marketing tool, but they don't actually practice it. When you practice it, you know, stop using plastic bags and, you know, packaging your garment. Use it, you know, tie it up with a ribbon or something, you know, stuff like that. Practice actual what you preach, and you usually will work better in the long run.
And I also want to bounce off to what you just said, Chung, about practicing it. Watch out for your language too. I do think that for the question is, should it go on a website or a hang tag? It should go on those places, but make sure it's authentic, and what you put out there is not vague, like words like sustainable fibers and ethical practices. It is a little vague. So tell them what it is that you're doing that is so sustainable. If they're repurposed fibers, say that. If it's waterless dyeing, say it, because otherwise at this point, people are looking really for greenwashing. So I think it's important that everything we say is not just echo-babble.
And I just want to add one thing from one of our attendees, Gabriella, who brought this point, which I think I started with the social responsibility, but I think thinking about sustainable manufacturers. So, you know, being socially responsible from fair wages, you know, good space or fair conditions and everything, and also working with slow fashion companies. So that's another aspect of sustainability, like, you know, it's because social responsibility in my mind is part of sustainability. So I think we talked a lot about materials, but I think that's also an equally important part of the whole mix. So when we are trying to produce locally, which I think maybe one or two of you are here, you do produce locally. So we have a more control about how we can give that, be more responsible in that space. But again, when you're sourcing, right, sourcing from places who can give you that aspect, like they can give you that they're giving fair conditions and fair wages in the local environment.
So beautifully said. So if we can each go, if you could each tell everyone once again your name and the name of your company and how they can contact you after today, then please do that. Lanette, do you want to start, please?
I'm Lanette Freitag with FeltLOOM Incorporated, and our website is FeltLOOM.com, and you can type my name in, Lanette, Lanette, at FeltLOOM.com.
I will connect. Amazing. Chung?
Well, anybody want to contact us, it's pretty simple. Just call us or just go on our website, which is mcmenterprise.com or .net. Have all the information over there. But if you have a pen and paper, my number is 718-438-8443.
Old school, perfect. Thank you. Anna?
I'm Anna Livermore, and I offer a complimentary 20-minute strategy session that you can book on my website, V.Mora.com. That's V as in Victor, MORA.com, and you just go book a strategy and you can get on my calendar.
Peter?
I'm Peter Shaer. With Zen Textiles. We have an in-stock collection with very low minimums. Delivery is about 2 weeks. You can find the entire collection at zentextiles.com. At Zen Textiles with S at the end. You can see the full collection. You can contact us. I'm happy to wait.
Anu?
Well, you can contact me via ESRAP or through St. Catherine University, and I think we'll share the email also via the the Fashiondex platform. But you can reach me at pasricha@stk.edu. That's the fastest way. And I'm here to answer any questions. If you have questions about sustainability, like thinking about fibers, coming from academia, I can give you that kind of consulting about based on your questions. And I work in both spaces of materials as well as the social responsibility space. So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And a lot of time, like, it's all pro bono, because for me, it's more about making industry more sustainable. So it's not about, trying to have a business or anything per se. But so, yeah, you can actually Google me also. So it's easy to find me. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, wherever, and you'll be able to see.
Thank you so much. And you can reach out to me at akennedy@fashiondex.com if you need any specific sources. Do you have camel hair fabrics? Camel hair fabrics?
Camel hair.
No, okay. So if you're looking for camel hair fabrics and anything else, just reach out to akennedy@fashiondex.com and we can shoot you off several suppliers that we know of and work with. So
yeah, one of them was attending the, there was someone who talked about the camel hair and
yeah,
like how sustainable that
I
is.
have
Yeah.
it right up. So I'm so sorry if we did not get to your question. We apologize. We'll try and stay on and answer some of those, but we are officially ended. I want to thank Lanette, Peter, Anna, and Chung for the generosity of your time and knowledge and expertise. And Anu, thank you so much. It was so fun co-moderating this together. We want to thank Texworld so much for having us. And please, if you're in New York, stop by. Well, the show closes at 6 today, but tomorrow from 10 to 4, you can attend virtually and contact all of these suppliers and more, or you can attend in person. And there's a beautiful trend pavilion as well. So with that, we wish you good luck in your journey to creating a fully sustainable, ethical, and just fashion brand. Thanks, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.